Welcome, history enthusiasts, to a journey not into the grand love stories, but into the stark realities of marriage throughout the ages. We've all heard tales of epic passion, tragic romance, and hearts intertwined against all odds. But what about the vast majority of historical unions? The ones driven purely by practicality, power, and property. Today, we're lifting the veil on history's least exciting romances. These aren't stories of forbidden love or grand gestures. They're chronicles of duty, alliances, and sometimes outright indifference. From royal families meticulously planning their bloodlines to commoners securing their livelihoods, marriage was often a strategic maneuver, a political pact, or an economic merger, with personal affection often at the bottom of the priority list. Get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about historical romance. Let's start with the pinnacles of power: royal and aristocratic marriages. For centuries, these unions were less about personal connection and more about geopolitical chess. Dynasties rose and fell on the strength of their marital alliances. A princess wasn't just a bride, she was a treaty in human form, a living bond between nations, or a critical link in securing a family's claim to a throne. Her personal feelings, her compatibility with her future spouse, or even her happiness were almost entirely irrelevant. The goal was simple: secure peace, expand territory, consolidate wealth, or produce an heir. This wasn't a world of dating apps or choosing your soulmate. It was a world of arranged unions, often between strangers, for the greater good of the crown or the family name. The stakes were incredibly high, and the pressure on these individuals to perform their marital duty was immense, often leading to profoundly unromantic situations. Perhaps no family exemplifies the practical and ultimately tragic side of dynastic marriage more than the Habsburgs. For centuries, this powerful European family pursued a relentless strategy of intermarriage to consolidate their vast territories, which spanned from Spain to the Holy Roman Empire. The goal was to keep wealth and power in the family. While initially successful, this extreme endogamy led to a notorious genetic condition: the Habsburg jaw, or mandibular prognathism, a severe facial deformity. More critically, it resulted in a devastating lack of genetic diversity, leading to high rates of infant mortality, infertility, and congenital disabilities among their offspring. The quest for power and purity of bloodline ultimately bred weakness and, quite literally, diminished the spark in their family tree. These marriages were the ultimate demonstration of duty over desire, with dire biological consequences. Moving to a different kind of unexciting union, let's consider the marriage of Catherine the Great and Peter the Third of Russia. This was a union forged in political convenience, not affection. Catherine, then Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, was chosen as a bride for Peter, heir to the Russian throne, primarily because she was a distant relative to the Prussian royal family, aligning with Empress Elizabeth's foreign policy goals. From the outset, their marriage was a disaster. Peter was immature, cruel, and reportedly impotent, while Catherine was intelligent, ambitious, and hungry for intellectual stimulation. Their relationship was characterized by mutual disdain, infidelity, and eventually open hostility. Peter openly flaunted his mistress, and Catherine sought solace and power elsewhere. This wasn't just a loveless marriage, it was a politically volatile one, culminating in Peter's overthrow and likely assassination, orchestrated by his own wife. Hardly the stuff of romantic poetry. England's Tudor dynasty, particularly King Henry VIII, provides a master class in marriages driven by political necessity and the desperate need for a male heir. Henry's 6 wives were not chosen for deep emotional connection, but for their potential to secure the succession, forge alliances, or provide a suitable male heir. His first marriage to Catherine of Aragon was a dynastic alliance with Spain, inherited from his brother. When she failed to produce a surviving son, Henry's desperate need for an heir led to an unprecedented split from the Catholic Church and a series of subsequent marriages, each with its own political and personal drama, but rarely, if ever, true romantic love. Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, Catherine Parr, each played a specific, often tragic role in his quest for power and a male successor, making their unions decidedly unromantic and often brutally transactional. Beyond the dramatic tales of monarchs, the concept of royal duty cast a long, unromantic shadow over countless princely and princely lives. From a young age, these individuals were groomed for their roles, and part of that role was to marry strategically. They often had little to no say in who their spouse would be. Their unions were negotiated by advisors, ambassadors, and parents, often based on miniature portraits and diplomatic reports, rather than personal encounters. The expectation was that they would perform their duty, produce heirs, and maintain the decorum of their station. Affection, if it developed, was a bonus. It was certainly not a prerequisite. This profound lack of agency, the constant pressure to conform to dynastic demands, stripped much of the potential for genuine romance from their lives, replacing it with a sense of obligation and often isolation. While royal marriages often prioritized statecraft, for the landed gentry and rising merchant classes, marriage was primarily an economic contract. In societies where wealth was tied to land and inheritance, a good marriage could mean the difference between prosperity and poverty. Daughters were often seen as assets, their hand in marriage a means to consolidate estates, gain advantageous business connections, or secure social climbing. The concept of a marriage portion or dowry was central. The bride brought property or money to the marriage, which then became part of the husband's estate. This system often led to parents vetting potential suitors not for their charm or kindness, but for their financial standing and prospects. Love might eventually grow, but it certainly wasn't the foundation. Financial security and social advancement were the bedrock of these unions, making them more akin to business mergers than romantic partnerships. A fascinating, albeit unromantic, example of economic marriage comes from the Gilded Age, particularly the phenomenon of dollar princesses. Wealthy American heiresses, often from newly rich industrialist families, found themselves with immense fortunes, but lacked the social prestige of European aristocracy. Conversely, many old European noble families had prestigious titles and crumbling estates, but little cash. Enter the transatlantic marriage market. These heiresses were sold to European dukes, counts, and marquesses, exchanging their vast American dollars for ancient titles and social standing. The most famous example is Consuelo Vanderbilt, who was forced into a marriage with the Duke of Marlborough, a union she openly detested. Despite her wealth, she was desperately unhappy. These marriages were transactional in the extreme, often lacking any genuine affection. Yet they perfectly illustrate the exchange of different forms of capital, financial for social, in a profoundly unromantic bargain. Beyond wealth and power, sheer survival and social conformity played a massive role in historical marriages. For many commoners, marriage wasn't just a choice. It was often a necessity for establishing a household, sharing labor, and securing old age support. In agrarian societies, a wife and children were essential for working the land. Without a spouse, life could be incredibly difficult.